So you've had your camera for a while and now you want to try out some new lenses, but you don't really want to spend a lot of money because you're not quite sure what lens to get or even what you might need it for. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 Canon lenses that will be good for starting out in photography and videography that don't cost a lot of money. Hi, I'm Joseph Alexander and I like to make videos. I appreciate you watching this video, and if it's something that you find beneficial, I hope you consider subscribing. So today's video is going to consist of 3 Canon lenses that you can get that are going to be inexpensive, decently built, and are a great way to start in photography or video. These lenses could be in addition to your standard kit lens that you would get with something like a Canon SL2 or T7i. And it's a great way to start out when you're not sure of what to get, but you still want to expand from that kit lens that you get in order to try something new. Now, these lenses are what's considered a prime lens. A prime lens is a fixed focal length lens. This is different from a zoom lens. You'll see on a zoom lens, it says you can go anywhere from, say, 18mm to 55mm, like your typical kit lens that comes with your camera. A prime lens is a fixed lens, and the 3 focal lengths that we're going to focus on today are the 24mm, the 40mm, and the 50mm. Now, before we get started, I'm going to list some pros and some cons for these lenses. So one pro for these lenses is that they are tiny. They are what's called a pancake lens, meaning the size of them is small, that you could just put them in a back pocket, that you can carry them around with you in your bag without having to worry about them taking up too much room. However, a con that goes with that is because it is so small, the features of them, there's not so many features. There's not stabilization built into these lenses, so you have to learn how to hold your camera steady. There is it's very limited in the autofocus. Now, you can use the autofocus on it, but do keep in mind that the features on it are not going to be as good as you would get with, say, a higher end Canon lens or a Sigma. Another thing about these lenses is they are plastic. So because they are so inexpensive, they have to come up with inexpensive materials to build them out of, and unfortunately one of those materials is plastic. However, the mounts for these are still the metal mounts on them, so you can rest assured that it's going to create a decent seal over your sensor, and it's going to stay locked in place while you're filming or while you're taking photos. So while I've talked about some pros and cons concerning these lenses, let's start out looking at them, starting with the Canon 24mm. Now, the Canon 24mm is a great lens when you want to get kind of that wide angle look. It's not going to be too wide, especially with your Canon SL2 or your T7i, which have an APS-C sensor. What that means is it kind of crops in the image. You'll hear of full frame and you'll hear of APS-C sensors or a crop image sensor. And pretty much what it does is it takes standard length that comes on the lens, so this being a 24mm, and it multiplies that out by 1.6, and that is the actual focal length for the lens. So this 24mm comes out roughly around 35mm when you use it. 35mm is great for portraits. It is great for those landscape shots if you're just starting out. Granted, when you want to do landscape, you typically want a wider lens so you can get more depth of field and so you can get more of the landscape into your image. However, I have found with this lens, you can get some decent landscape shots. You just have to be careful how you set up your shot and how you have everything set and positioned. One of the downsides of this lens, though, and with the other 2 lenses, is it causes a little bit of vignetting on the side. So if you were to open this lens up all the way to a 2.8, what it does is it creates a big depth of field, but it causes a black shadow, a little bit of a vignetting on the sides, and it cuts in those corners. You're not going to notice that so much on a crop sensor camera, but you will notice it on more of a full frame camera. However, this lens is the only lens out of this lineup that will work solely for a crop sensor camera. It will not work on a full frame. So if you have a full frame camera, like a 5D, you are not going to be able to use this lens. You will have to use something else. So now that I've talked about the 24mm and some of what it can do, let's move on to the 40mm Canon lens. So the 40mm lens is what I use on a regular basis. This is the lens I choose to use when I shoot basic interview type videos. So for the local church that I do some of the videography for, they do their video announcements and then they post them on a Sunday morning for the church to see, and this is the lens that I use. What it does is it gives me a nice shot from about the waist to about the head height of where you can kind of see a little bit of everything. It's a nice medium shot without being too far away from the subject. But at the same time, it still gives you a little bit of distance. It gives you some decent depth of field as well, so you can get kind of that blurry background behind you. So both the 24mm and the 40mm lens are 2.8 aperture, which means I can get this lens pretty wide open and get a lot of light to flood into the lens. Both of these lenses have the autofocus. The ring for manual focus is kind of small on both of those lenses. However, I have not had too much difficulty changing that around when I'm filming. So finally, the lens that I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite lenses, and that is the 50mm, or as some people refer to it, the Nifty 50. So I am not holding that lens right now in my hand because that is currently filming me right now, but this is possibly my favorite lens. I would use it all the time except for the fact that it is not a zoom and it is a prime, so I have to be further away from my subject, which means for vlogging I can't be holding it all the way out here because I won't be able to see myself. I'll be too close to my face. Or for any of the wide shots, I need to have a smaller focal length, so like the 24mm or the 40. But this is my favorite lens for a couple of reasons. One, it has been around for quite a while, and a lot of professionals have used it before becoming professionals. This gives me about an 85mm focal length on a crop sensor camera, which an 85mm is roughly what you would use if you were shooting a wedding and you don't want to be too close to the bride and groom. For me, this is one of my favorite focal lengths because of the detail I can get, the depth of field I can get with the compression. It also has a lower f-stop of 1.8. But again, you're going to run into that issue with the vignetting on the corners. So do keep that in mind, that the more open you make this lens, the darker on the outside of the image it will be. So now that I've talked about kind of what these lenses can do, I'm going to kind of show you some pictures and even some video so you can see the focal length on these lenses. So the first image you see is going to be of the 50mm taken. Now this is only about a foot away from the lenses. And then you'll see the 40mm. You can kind of see it's similar to the 50mm, but still a little different. But then as we back away to the 24mm, you're going to see that there is a lot more space between the subject and the camera. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these lenses on so you can see the difference. Like I said, this is the 50mm, and then I'm going to put the 40 on, and I'll show you what the 24mm looks like. So I hope you found this video helpful. I'm going to be linking below some articles about all three of these lenses, and I hope that you find those helpful in making your decision about purchasing a new lens as an upgrade to your kit lens with the camera. Please consider subscribing, consider liking this video if you found it helpful. It really helps me out. Also, I want to give another shout out this week to Declan Wilson. Declan is a daily vlogger. I have found it beneficial to watch his videos and to be encouraged by him. He is an excellent storyteller. So I'm going to link his YouTube channel below. And if you find it something that you might be interested in, I would ask you that you would consider watching it and even possibly subscribing to it as well. So again, my name is Joseph Alexander. I like to make videos, and I'll see you in the next one.